Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to In the Company of Charity, the podcast of the Daughters of Charity. I'm Sister Liz, and I'm here with Sister Elizabeth. We missed you last week, but here we are.
Yes, I know. I was in holy retreat with our sisters, so um, it's been an interesting week for me with the sisters here in Seton on retreat, and um, I've been thinking about this podcast as well, and thinking about these really big issues. That's been my thing for the last couple of weeks. Big issues of service, of just being together with the sisters here. Seton is our care facility. We don't really call it a retirement facility because they're not really retired.
The
Our
Ministry of
sisters are
Prayer, baby.
in
There,
ministry of prayer, and
yes.
and we realize that as daughters, once we've recognized our calling, we're daughters forever, right? So being with them has been a real treat, but also realizing that fidelity that they've had over 60, 70 years as daughters of charity, it's pretty amazing. And then thinking about Matthew Carter's interview in the sense of the urgency and the long care it takes to really try to do something like eradicate poverty and eradicate
Mm.
homelessness. And yeah, so it's been pretty interesting. I can kind of even tell I've been in retreat for the last week, and in retreat even before my own retreat up in South Dakota. So I'm really mellow. Like I just feel
Got
very
that
mellowed out.
calm vibe you have.
Yeah, very very calm retreat vibe. So yeah. So
And that,
thank you for
that's
pitching in and filling in and getting this first episode done. And the second episode, I think it really, for me, the second episode is the work that he's doing now. Matthew is an amazing human being who's done work around the world to address and give voice to people who are living in areas of poverty that some of us couldn't even begin to comprehend. Um, but then to look at an issue like homelessness, which is in front of us every day in every city that we
mm,
see, and say, it is possible. It's at least something we should try to do, is
yes.
to eradicate homelessness. That doesn't mean there won't be anybody living on the streets. It just means this sense that everyone would feel like they had a place to call home somewhere, somehow. Um,
Yeah.
and so yeah, it's a big issue and a big question, and he's the man to address it through DePaul USA, DePaul International, and DePaul USA.
When this past week we had this thing called Search and Serve. This is a discernment experience for young ladies thinking about consecrated life, thinking about the Daughters of Charity. And one of the places we served was St. Vincent de Paul Church in St. Louis, where they have this meal program and outreach. And one of the things they stressed in their little mini orientation for us as we were going to serve the meal was to look people in the eye. And I just thought that was so powerful. I mean, it kind of, the sisters already have that idea of human dignity and very much meeting the person where they are in kindness and respect. But I loved that they emphasized that so that we can see people and themselves look at us and be willing to be seen. And um, I think that's with that foundation, it's a great way to look at this episode of we're not just creating a model or a program. It starts from seeing my brother and sister who are in need and willing to be moved and willing to try and willing, as he speaks of in DePaul International, of having an international effort where we can learn from each other and see what works in different contexts, different countries. And yeah, this is a great episode. And if you want to learn more about homelessness and what is being done out there, I think this is a good one to really pay attention to and to listen to the wisdom that we're going to hear in this interview. So, um, yeah, enjoy the episode. And if you have comments, if you have suggestions for us, prayer requests, you know how to reach us, companyofcharity@gmail.com. And we'll see you in the next one. God bless everybody.
Do you feel that as that happens, as you begin to create a wider web of looking at homelessness through this Vincentian lens, that really roots itself in the dignity of the human person, that doesn't broaden it so much that it becomes diluted, but in fact really intensifies the idea that homelessness, no matter where it occurs, is somewhat the same, and also is rooted in, as you were saying, the kind of the voice of each place. Poverty is poverty. The needs of people are the needs of people. But as an international program, when you look at homelessness, do you see similarities? Are there areas where you feel like this is a different kind of homelessness we haven't seen before? This is a homelessness that's going to be much harder for us to address. What's the scope of it that you see as you move around and now are reaching out to other parts of the world? How does all of this work?
And without question, it's become more complex, which is, what you're saying. And when I grew up, the very few people lived on the streets in the UK. We used to have, they were called wayfarers often, people who travelled all the time, not travellers, but people who chose to live outside. And I remember my parents always had an open door. This probably goes back to where my drive came from. But I remember people coming in off the streets and having dinner with us. We always there were seven of us, but quite often there were 8 or 9 or 10 having dinner every evening. And that's the way it always was. And I remember when drug addiction, this was in the 70s, started to materialize. And we had young people coming in who were on heroin and other things. And again, our door was open. And but it was very different then. And now, as you've said, it's become far more complex. And the world has shrunk in many ways. It hasn't become bigger. We're much more aware through communication and media, etc. We understand and we see things much more visually. So, when I worked in emergency work at the beginning, it was us reaching out to tell the public about this emergency, but now the media is there before we are there often to tell that story. So everything has shrunk. Also, we have wayfarers and we have people on drugs and alcohol, but we also have people who are seeking asylum. We have refugees, we have migration, and it's all getting mixed into the same pot, and we're trying to unpack that. And we're also having extreme poverty driving homelessness as well. And it was interesting, in relation to one of your comments, that when we met with the church, the Vincentian family in the Philippines, and they came to us at the end of a Family and Homeless Alliance assembly, and they said, "We would really like to work more closely with you." And I thought I knew what the answer was, and actually it wasn't the answer I was expecting, or the first answer. And their answer was, "We want to work as part of a global community. We want to be able to tap into what you have learned working with other communities, and we want to be able to share what we have learned." And sometimes it was such a textbook answer in some ways, but it was absolutely the center of what the Vincentian family were doing in the Philippines, but in terms of programming, but they wanted to become part of something global. And I think that's what's so exciting about the Vincentian family, is that sort of global identity of working with communities as one, recognizing diversity and difference and energy and where there are real difficulties and bringing it together. and then working with those various parts of the incentive community that bring such great resource like the daughters.
Yeah, it's as you're speaking and talking about the Philippines and saying they want to be part of something global, an initiative that looks and that they have something to offer as well as something to gain, right? It's we have knowledge, we have techniques, we have our own protocols, our own best practice, and we know that others have theirs and sometimes we talk in our silos, we don't see that I might look at the Philippines and say, well, homelessness in the Philippines is different than the United States. But someone who doesn't have a roof over their head is the same person no matter where they live. They're
Yeah,
vulnerable, they're living in poverty, they have needs. And I loved it, go back a little bit to what you were saying about the, uh, the abolition of homelessness. It's not about what I think sometimes people think, well, if we just had more housing, that would solve it. Or if we just made getting into housing easier, or if we could just get people, get them off the street, that will end homelessness. I just don't want people on the street in front of me. I don't want to see it. Let's just get them in somewhere. That those kinds of solutions are not sustainable, first of all, and they often are not the answer. And so how do you see the sense of eradicating something? I mean, that's a big goal, and I think it's the right one. I think it's the right approach because we're not just talking DePaul International, DePaul USA as a as a system now around the world addressing the needs of homelessness is not apartment buildings. We're not just opening up housing. So what are the nuances and the dimensions and the web of what it takes to really address an issue like eradicating homelessness? What does that look like when you think about DePaul, each country doing what it needs to do in the face of the homelessness and the government structures and the ability for neighborhoods and states and cities, especially in the United States? How do we even begin this conversation without getting caught in the quagmire of we have to have more drug addiction counseling, we have to do this, we just need to get them off the street? It's not that simple. How do you enter that kind of conversation and help people to understand that while it is a big issue, it is absolutely doable to eradicate homelessness?
it is. Yeah, it is doable, but we're a long way from achieving that. I mean, it's the US program, DePaul program, is extraordinary. It's our fastest growing national program, and we're moving into, I think it's 12 stroke 13 cities over a 15-year period. So that's nearly one a year. And that's been funded through a variety of sources and supported, but massively supported by the daughters in terms of gifting or loaning of buildings and then funding as well, and then federal funding is also. And it's an extraordinary program. And it's still only scratching the surface, as you know. DePaul, Ukraine, prior to the war, extraordinary work working with young people, 10,000 people a day, 10,000 people a year prior to the war. It's now working with 40,000 people a day. Extraordinary growth of that program, providing care and support for those people living on the streets, but also embarking into new areas, but becoming leaders in those new areas, like in psychosocial trauma counselling. And they're leading the field in much of Ukraine on the front line, working with young people. And I think it's an important part of the DePaul's sort of ideology is around innovation, which is really, really important. It's not a blueprint approach. So if I was able to visually show you now what all 8 family members are doing, they're all doing slightly different things. And I think that is our uniqueness. We don't say we just go in and we run a day centre and that's it. We go and we do trauma counselling with young people. We get young people back into school who've been deeply traumatised by conflict. We're working with people in the DAX housing program, young vulnerable students who need help in terms of ensuring their safety, but also as a place for them to live during their educational years, which is so important. Otherwise, they'd be on the streets, sort of sofa surfing or sleeping in a car. And that's mirrored in Ireland. It's working with people with long-term alcohol problems. Historically there, but just a really big issue, and that now DePaul Island has become a global leader in working with these type of people. The UK continue to have that focus on young people. Croatia working the linkage between homelessness and prisons. Those people coming out of prison often end up on the streets very quickly and then back into prison again. How do you break those cycles? France has huge issues with people living on the streets, particularly as it's a transit point for people for those seeking asylum or displaced or coming out of North Africa, and issues of health and care. And we run this amazing mobile shower program around the centre of Paris of keeping people clean and healthy. And again, an extraordinary program. These sort of examples about differences, but at the centre, held together by our Vincentian values, that vision that St. Vincent used in that many 400-year-old tradition. That's what we say in the past, which is extraordinary, and that lives on. But in terms of resolving, we have to. I think the biggest thing is we have to work collectively. We have to look at new forms of collaboration. We can't just do things in isolation. We can't in London just continue to run homeless services between 20 agencies. We have to look at how we do things differently, how we put ourselves out of a job because we've succeeded. And I think that's a lot of the language that my previous sector, the development sector, talks about. When the job is done, we can step away. And I think we're heading in that direction, but we should embrace that because I think it helps you to deliver on your ambition better. If you see some sense of a conclusion to ending homelessness in different places. But clearly, housing sits right at the centre of that. There is a massive global housing issue that has to be addressed. But hand in hand with that goes housing and people. You can't just see it as a structural solution. It's about maintaining that value of people's integrity. Every single person. I remember years ago in Somalia, and we were evacuating a refugee camp outside Mogadishu. And we left, and I said, I think we should do one final sweep of this camp. And the person I was with, no, it's absolutely fine. It's all clear, nothing. No, let's leave. And I said, no, I really want to check one more time. And they said, no, really. And I said, no, I'm going to walk back through this camp. And it was just, you can imagine bits of stick and plastic sheeting in those sort of bubbles that you see in refugee camps in Africa. And as I walked back across the camp, I heard a voice and I heard some whimpering. And it was a mother with 3 children just hiding, just absolutely terrified of where she was going to be taken and what was happening. And I came in and helped them, and we led them to the vehicles where they were looked after. But that's always stayed with me, that memory of the individual and that mother with her 3 children. That's what sits at the centre of our Vincentian family, always about the individual, not about the mass, but about how we work with everybody equally.
Yeah, because I think we can, as you said, we certainly can build more the housing, the capacity, what's available for people to move into is one issue. That's absolutely paramount. Vincent was a landowner. He built lots of things because he saw that these
Yeah.
people have to go somewhere. You can spend all day feeding people, but if they don't have any place to go, just to rest, just to sleep in a bed, just there is the human capacity to sustain that kind of poverty is overwhelming. You can't even find the words to describe what that means, and so that balance of creating capacity at the same time, but more importantly, creating a space where people can move out of their own poverty in a way that's safe and comfortable. Comfortable is such an odd word, but in a way that meets their needs, not my needs. The worst thing you can do is rush somebody into a solution, right? Because if they're not ready, it's not going to go well. And I
Yeah.
think that's a really important for me as a Vincentian woman, coming into a life as a daughter of charity. That was the appeal to me with the
Mhm.
Vincentian charism, was this sense that it was people focused, it was person focused. Um, it's it's a charism that says this, as we were saying in this beginning, this poverty doesn't need to exist, but it does. And so, how do I address the needs of the person in front of me? And it goes back to that Vincentian question: what must be done? And what must be done is to listen and to hear the needs of people, not assume I know what they are, not assume that everyone's going to be housed in the same way, at the same time, and at the same pace. I think that's the slow, slow work of of abolition, right? It's the slow work of justice. It's the slow work of creating a world that is less violent to one another, a work that really moves us into seeing the humanity of one another and recognizing that people want what they want. We know what people need in their own space, and to be available to do that at their pace and not my own, I think is a really
Mhm.
important piece, especially about what I found in DePaul International. That whole message of I'm here with you. I'm not here to lead you. I'm here to walk with you. Where you go, I go. And we use whatever resources we can find to help you to find the goal, to reach the goal you're looking for. So I guess some of our last questions is, what do you see in these new works that are developing? What are some of the newer challenges, or can you even see them yet, that the world is facing in relation to homelessness? We may address one issue and then another pops up. What do you maybe look into a crystal ball and say, what do you see as the world is moving now? What might be places where DePaul International, while it has its eye on the ball, also needs to have its eye into the future?
Well, I certainly just to underline your words of um, to walk with, to work with, to walk with, to walk alongside those in poverty. It is so centrally with what we do. We're not different. We're not separate. We are part, and that's what we have to hold on to so strongly and cherish. When we were both in Macon for the sleep out, um, actually some of the most uplifting bits of the night amongst that horrendous rain. So for those who are listening, we had the most like tropical downpour, and we were in tents, and the rain was beating, on and we went into the night shelter with the day centre was open through the night, and we went in and you could get a cup of tea. But it was the conversations that happened through the night, like the questions you've just asked about how do we address this more effectively? What are the solutions? And I think the challenges I've listed one of the challenges I think we have to hold on to with everything we've got onto our values. I don't think our values are under threat, but the continuation of our Vincentian way of doing things must continue to shine in a time when there's so much poverty, but also challenge in the world. And I think that's something that would be right at the forefront of challenging those things in a very positive way, as is the Vincentian family now. We must continue to hold on to that and roll out that values training and bringing people on board is so critical. How we again, and I've mentioned this already, collaboration. We always talk about collaboration, but collaboration must sit at the centre of what we do. Collaborating both locally, regionally, nationally, internationally, how can we can work together more effectively and come up with ideas of how that might work. You know, we have amazing means of communicating now. How can we hold ourselves together and work as one community? Is really it's how we work outside of that, how we work with other groupings within the church, perhaps especially where we share the same vision. We can pull those resources in different ways. We still retain that independence as well, which is often really important, but where we can work still as a family. Challenge governments where we really need to, as homelessness grows, work with the United Nations on that rollout of identifying and clarifying what do we mean by homelessness. You know, is it slum dwellers as well? Is it refugees? No, it's not all those things, but there is a complexity in the areas in which we live. And ensure we can raise the resources that we can continue to provide vital services. And we do so well in that area as well. We shouldn't shy away from that. We think it's only about money. It's not about money. But if we look at what's happened in funding of the US program of years, extraordinary work has been done and continues to be done. They're providing critical support to those who are rough sleeping, living on the streets, or with alcohol and substance abuse, or as I've described, students needing safety and security as they do their degrees, not living in the back of a car, etc. So there's lots to be done. And I think the thing I would say is, how do we bring ourselves together? Can we make our sort of gatherings more practical and enthusiastic and not just go through the motions, but how do we bring new energy? And I think we have got that new energy. And I've described that sort of innovation right at the center of family, that we need to make sure that's fueled, that innovation, providing different ideas, solutions for how we address homelessness. And I think that will find the solutions and is finding the solutions.
Yeah, and I think it's finding the solutions with those we see as those we're serving, right? That the solutions are not all ours. That the solutions really lay at the very basic levels of what is it you need and how can we help you gain and help you come to that place. What influence do I have that I can use to leverage for you, not in a way that I just use what I have, but how do I take what I have? How does DePaul USA, how does DePaul International, how does the Vincentian family? There are millions and millions of us around the world doing this work. And how do we take all of that and bring it to not just a best practice, because best practice in one place is not best practice in another, but how do we see what's best in relation to the people in front of me, the person in front of me. I'll tell you a quick story. When we were in Macon, and I had not been back for a long time. I left in 2015. Daybreak and our listeners have heard me talk about the work in Macon a lot, and it's huge now. I mean, it's got a housing program, it's got an actual clinic, not just two little rooms that we always tried to do healthcare out of. But as I was walking up to the center, this gentleman came up and he's like, Sister Elizabeth. And I had not seen this guy probably, it's got to be, 10 years. And he said, "Hey, it's Thomas." And I was like, "Yes, I know it's you. You remember me?" And we had this big reunion. And I said, "Thomas, what are you doing here?" He said, "Oh, no. I don't come here anymore. I don't come here anymore. Daybreak helped me. It got me an apartment, got me a job, got me all this stuff." He said, "I'm here because there's some friends I have who needed something here. And so I always know where to go when I have a friend in need. This is where I go." I said, "Oh, are they homeless?" He said, No, they're not homeless. I just know they needed this, this place." And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. That his total way was like, no, homelessness isn't our issue, but it's these other issues. And that's when I began to realize that the structures we build in order to help Thomas, who was at a time homeless, move to a place of stability to the point where he isn't going there because his friend is homeless. He knew there was health care there, there's mental health services there, there's just people there who will help you find a birth certificate, or you don't have to be a particular type of person. It's not like you can only go there if you're homeless. You can go there if you need anything. That DePaul, this place, is going to try to help you with your need. They're friends of the community. That to me was a really powerful message. He was totally like, "Oh no, no, we're not homeless. We're fine. Don't worry about that." It was something else. I was like, "Wow, that's a new dimension for me to realize that what has developed in this place is not where we started. Our identity is very different now among the people we were choosing to reach out to, that they see something different." And that to me was a really important message, that we may go into a community to do one thing, but our openness and our friendliness and our ability to be available helps us and helps them to create a system that really is helpful in ways I would never have imagined. Couldn't have guessed that this kind of service is what people are going to need. And yet that's what evolves. And if we stay rigid on our identity as we're only doing this, we miss the opportunities that I think really are part of that eradicating of homelessness, right? These two guys going into this center, now housed, most likely will not be unhoused again because of
Yeah.
something that's happening at Daybreak that's helping sustain them. That to me is part of the eradicating it. There's not that going back anymore for some people. And that was beautiful. This is beautiful. And then he remembered me. I thought, well, he sees me in my habit. He knows right away. But I knew right away who he was, and it was such a delight to see him. I thought I could go home now. I'm done. I don't need to be here all night. Although it was great being there. Yeah, it was fun. It was fun. So
I
we've
think
covered. Go ahead.
I think it made me my first day with DePaul, my first weeks. We went up to a shelter up in North London, and it was a shelter that provided care for women who've been trafficked and abused and got wrapped up in modern day slavery and horrendous, horrendous stories. And I arrived and I didn't meet any of those clients because they were very protected, and many of them were very extremely vulnerable and needed 24/7 care. But I went into the team meeting of the carers who worked with them, and they were extraordinary, as you would, absolutely extraordinary people. And so I went in and they were just having their team meeting and they said, "So what are you doing here? Who do you work for?" Quite blunt. And I said, "Well, I work for DePaul International." "Oh, so you're trying to take over the world, are you?" And I said, "No." They said, "Well, tell us about what you do then," just in a very straightforward way. And I was going, reminded me a bit when you go into a sixth form college, school, and you get the worst grilling or the toughest grilling ever. It's why I loved going into universities to talk with the students. But I explained what we did as DePaul International and our Vincentian values. And this young woman looked up at me, who was one of the carers, and she said, "You're doing good work, mate. Keep it up." And
That's
it
great.
stayed with me forever because it's
Yeah.
that sort of bluntness, and the
Mm.
people who deliver the services, as we know, whether it's in Daybreak or in the place I just described in North London, they're amazing people who have the privilege of working with, who give up their lives, or this becomes their career to provide really in really tough conditions. It's not easy, as we know.
Yeah. It's been a pleasure talking with you. We could go on and on and on. I know that. Um, we'll put in our show notes the links to DePaul International and to DePaul USA, of course. Um, Folks can go online and check all this out because it's enormous, to see all the different dimensions. And yet, in the end, I think we're closing with that idea that it's about people with people,
Yeah.
and it's about being open to the distress of the world and saying, we want to bring peace. We want to bring a sense of contentment, a sense of safety, a place where people can thrive, live lives that are productive in whatever way, in whatever understanding that is, and to bring poverty to a place of eradication. That there just doesn't need to be this kind of poverty in the world. There are ways, and that openness of conversation, I think, is what's so important about the Vincentian family. It feels sometimes we're constantly talking, as we have been talking today. But all of that talk leads us, I think, to the ability to talk to those we serve, those we sit with, those we interact with, in a way that's very open and allows for everyone's voice to be heard. And I think that's one of the really important pieces of a Vincentian way of serving. The way of being in the world is recognizing all voices matter. And Matthew, you have lived your life listening to those who live in such suffering. And I'm sure that there are many people who remember their conversation with Matthew Carter as one in which they felt better when they concluded the conversation and wanted more, as I'm feeling right now. We started in Gambia with the need for water. And I think we really haven't moved much further from that in some ways, right? We're still talking about the needs of people and the basic needs of people being addressed in order for them to live the best life they can. And that's, I think, what you have given your life to. And we're so grateful that you've jumped on the DePaul International bandwagon, taken on a Vincentian cape, and moving out into the world in your next superhero skill. So thank you so much for being with us today. And I know I will see you around the Vincentian family somewhere. Thanks so much, Matthew.
Thank you very much.